I had always known something was off with my wife. We had been together for years, but as time passed, I started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. Late-night texts, unexplained absences, and the occasional slip of a guilty look when I asked simple questions. But it wasn't until I discovered her affair that everything clicked. She had been cheating on me. The betrayal stung, but what hurt even more was how she tried to gaslight me afterward, denying everything and making me feel paranoid for questioning her. Her lies were so convincing that, at times, I began to doubt my own instincts. After much back and forth, we decided to separate, and I filed for divorce. But I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. I needed a plan. I wanted to get even and, more importantly, show her what it felt like to be on the receiving end of betrayal. So, I began to subtly manipulate the situation. I started acting distant and mentioning things like, "I'm going out with some friends," or "I've been talking to someone new," when we were still in communication. I dropped vague hints about meeting new people, engaging in activities that she wouldn't expect. But the real trick was when I fabricated a story about a work trip that would keep me away for a week. During that time, I kept up the act, texting her here and there as if I were out of reach, responding with short, distracted messages. I made sure she knew I was hanging out with a woman, nothing too explicit, just enough to spark her jealousy. Her reaction was exactly what I expected. She started texting me more urgently, asking questions about the woman I was with. I'd play it cool, giving minimal answers that only made her more paranoid. I knew she would start digging, and sure enough, she did. She reached out to my friends, trying to get more information about my supposed affair. Every time she found something incriminating, I'd pretend to be completely oblivious, denying everything, leaving her to stew in her own doubt. As the days went on, her jealousy and paranoia escalated. She began accusing me of cheating, even though she knew damn well that it was her who had crossed the line first. I watched as she spiraled, and for the first time, I felt a sense of power. It was a twisted form of justice, making her feel what I had felt when I discovered her betrayal. Eventually, I ended the charade. When I finally admitted that I had never cheated on her, the look on her face was priceless. She was furious, humiliated, and utterly ashamed of her own actions. I didn't need to rub it in any further. The emotional damage had already been done. In the end, it was more than just about revenge. It was about regaining my confidence and realizing that I deserved better. I didn't need to stoop to her level, but I also wasn't going to let her walk away scot-free. It was a bitter, complicated process, but it was my way of finding closure, sure. Here's the continuation of the story. The aftermath of everything left me feeling strangely empty. I had won in some twisted way, but it didn't bring me any real peace. Watching her react, humiliated and panicked, had been satisfying for a moment, but the weight of it all lingered. I had spent so much time focused on making her feel the same hurt that she had caused me that I hadn't given much thought to what I needed for myself. The divorce proceedings continued, but now there was an air of finality. I realized that I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was closing a chapter in my life that I had been holding on to far longer than I should have. I had clung to the idea of who she was, of what we had been, instead of facing the reality of what we had become. The truth was that I had known for a while, deep down, that she wasn't the woman I thought she was. In the weeks following the trick, I began to reflect more on my own life, where I was headed, and what I truly wanted. It wasn't just about revenge or settling scores, it was about moving on and healing. The satisfaction of knowing I had fooled her into thinking she had lost me the same way I had lost her slowly started to fade into the background, replaced by something deeper, a sense of self-worth. As the divorce was finalized, I felt lighter than I had in years. No more secrets, no more lies, no more wondering what was going on behind my back. I had freed myself from the shackles of a relationship built on deceit. My friends noticed the change, and it felt good to finally smile without the weight of betrayal hovering over me. And though I still occasionally thought about her, about how she had reacted, about whether she learned anything, it wasn't with the same venom or bitterness I once had. I knew I was moving forward, and she had to live with her own choices. If there was anything she'd taken away from our divorce, I hoped it was the realization that her actions had consequences, just like mine did. Months later, I ran into her at a mutual friends gathering. She looked different, more withdrawn, as though time had caught up with her, and perhaps it had. She glanced at me, a look of uncertainty in her eyes, but I wasn't angry. I wasn't even interested in talking. I had moved on, and I could see that she hadn't. We exchanged nothing more than a polite nod, and I walked away without a second thought. That was the moment I realized I didn't need any closure from her. I had already given it to myself. I was done with the games, done with the emotional turmoil. And with that, I stepped confidently into my next chapter, one that had no room for her and no room for the past. A year passed, and life slowly began to feel normal again, or at least a new kind of normal. The sting of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a cautious optimism about the future. I had thrown myself into hobbies I'd neglected during the marriage: hiking, cooking, and even learning to play the guitar, something I'd always told myself I'd get around to someday. Someday had finally arrived. But there was one unexpected change I hadn't foreseen. My social circle expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined. Friends I hadn't seen in years reconnected with me. They'd heard about the divorce and, to my surprise, rallied around me. It was refreshing to be surrounded by people who genuinely cared, without the shadow of my ex looming over every interaction. One of those friends was Amanda. She and I had worked together briefly years ago, but life had pulled us in different directions. She reached out when she heard I was single again, and our conversations quickly evolved from casual catch-ups to something more personal. There was a warmth and ease with her that I hadn't felt in years. She wasn't prying or overly cautious. She was just herself, and she let me be me. At first, I wasn't sure if I was ready for anything serious. I didn't want to carry the baggage of my past into something new. But Amanda was patient. She didn't push, and she didn't demand anything from me. She just showed up, kind, funny, and supportive. Slowly but surely, I started to let my guard down. Then one day, while Amanda and I were out for dinner, we bumped into my ex. It was one of those moments you don't plan for, but know will eventually happen. She was with a man I didn't recognize, and I could tell from the way she stiffened when she saw us that the encounter was just as awkward for her as it was for me. "Hey," she said, her voice tentative. "Hi," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Amanda, ever the picture of grace, smiled politely and introduced herself. My ex's eyes flicked between us, taking in the easy rapport and the way Amanda's hand rested lightly on my arm. There was a moment of silence before my ex cleared her throat. "You look happy," she said, almost reluctantly. "I am," I said simply. And I meant it. The conversation didn't last long, just a few pleasantries before we went our separate ways, but it left me with a profound sense of closure. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or resentment toward her. I didn't feel the need to prove anything, either. Seeing her was just another reminder of how far I'd come. As Amanda and I walked away, she squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said with a smile. "I'm better than okay." Life had taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving on and finding happiness on your own terms. My ex had been a chapter in my life, but she wasn't the whole story. And as I looked at Amanda, I realized I was finally ready to start writing the next one. The next chapter of my life unfolded in ways I never expected. Amanda and I grew closer with every passing month. She had this uncanny ability to sense when I needed space to process lingering scars and when I needed someone to pull me out of my head. She didn't try to fix me. She simply stood beside me as I pieced myself back together. That, more than anything, was what made me realize how different she was from anyone else I had ever known. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Amanda turned to me. "Do you ever think about her anymore?" she asked, not accusingly, just curious. I took a sip of my drink and thought for a moment. "Not in the way I used to," I said honestly. "For a long time, I carried a lot of anger and hurt. But now, she's more like a faded memory. A lesson, maybe." Amanda smiled softly. "Lessons are good. They remind us of what we deserve and what we don't. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. My ex had taught me a painful but necessary lesson about boundaries, trust, and self-worth. But Amanda was teaching me something far more valuable: what a healthy, supportive relationship could look like. One weekend, Amanda suggested we go hiking at a nearby trail. She knew how much I loved the outdoors, and she wanted to surprise me with a route she'd found online. As we trekked up the winding path, the conversation flowed effortlessly, as it always did with her. When we reached the summit, the view was breathtaking. Rolling hills stretched as far as the eye could see, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Amanda pulled out a small thermos of coffee she'd packed and handed me a cup. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her cup in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my cup against hers. It was in that moment, standing at the top of the world with Amanda by my side, that I realized I had finally let go of everything that had weighed me down. The bitterness, the resentment, even the need for closure. They were all gone. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt whole again. And for the first time in years, I was truly, deeply happy. Fast forward another year, and Amanda and I were still going strong. We'd moved in together, combining her cozy, eclectic style with my more minimalist taste. She joked that our home was a reflection of us, balanced, yet full of surprises. Then came the day that changed everything. We were at the same trail where she'd taken me for that first hike, standing at the same summit. Only this time, I had a surprise for her. As she marveled at the view, I pulled a small box from my pocket and knelt down. Her gasp turned into a laugh as she realized what was happening. "Amanda, you've shown me what love is supposed to be: patient, kind, and real. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded before pulling me into a tight embrace. "Of course I will," she whispered. In that moment, everything came full circle. My past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. Amanda wasn't just my new beginning. She was my forever. And as we stood there, the sun setting behind us, I realized that the best kind of revenge isn't about proving someone else wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you're strong enough to move forward and finding joy on the other side. The months leading up to our wedding felt like a whirlwind of excitement and joy. Amanda and I worked together to plan a day that truly reflected us: simple, heartfelt, and surrounded by the people who mattered most. No over-the-top extravagance, no unnecessary drama, just love, laughter, and the promise of a future together. The day of the wedding arrived, and as I stood at the altar, waiting for Amanda, I felt a nervous excitement I hadn't experienced in years. When she appeared, walking down the aisle in a simple yet stunning dress, everything else faded away. It was just her and me, and the life we were about to start together. The ceremony was short and sweet, just like we wanted. As we exchanged vows, Amanda said something that stuck with me. "You've shown me that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. It just has to be honest. I promise to stand by you, not just in the good times, but in the moments where we'll need to grow together. You're my best friend, my partner, and my safe place. And I can't wait to see where this journey takes us." Her words hit me hard because they were everything I hadn't known I needed to hear. For so long, I'd associated love with pain and compromise, but Amanda taught me that love could be healing, too. After the ceremony, we danced under the stars, surrounded by family and friends. My closest friends gave speeches that had everyone laughing and crying, and Amanda's family welcomed me with open arms, making me feel like one of their own. It was a perfect night, and as we drove away, cans clattering behind the car, Amanda rested her head on my shoulder and said, "This is just the beginning." The next chapter, married life with Amanda, was everything I'd hoped for and more. We didn't rush into big changes, no immediate moves, no kids right away. We wanted to enjoy each other and settle into this new phase of our relationship. We took spontaneous weekend trips, explored new hobbies together, and spent countless evenings just talking on the porch, dreaming about the future. Amanda encouraged me to open up in ways I never had before. She didn't just want to know what I thought, she wanted to know why. A year into our marriage, Amanda suggested we start volunteering together at a local community center. It was something she'd done before, and she thought it would be a good way for us to give back and bond in a new way. I was hesitant at first. I'd never been one for organized activities, but it turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Working with underprivileged kids, helping them with homework, and seeing the spark of excitement when they achieved something reminded me of the importance of community and compassion. It also deepened my appreciation for Amanda. Her heart was as big as her laugh, and she inspired me every day to be better. Not for her, but for myself. A family of our own. 2 years into our marriage, we started talking seriously about having kids. It wasn't an easy decision. My past had left me wary of repeating old patterns, but Amanda reassured me that we'd figure it out together, just like we always had. When we welcomed our daughter, Lily, into the world, everything changed. Holding her for the first time was an overwhelming mix of love, fear, and hope. I promised myself that I'd be the kind of father who showed her what healthy love looked like, so she'd grow up knowing her worth and never settle for less. Parenthood was a learning curve, but Amanda and I tackled it as a team. There were sleepless nights and moments of frustration, but also endless laughter and the kind of joy that made every challenge worth it. As Lily grew, Amanda and I made a point to carve out time for ourselves, too. Date nights, quiet mornings, and even small moments of connection kept our bond strong. One evening, as we watched Lily toddle around the living room, Amanda leaned against me and said, "Can you believe how far we've come?" I smiled, wrapping an arm around her. Not just how far we've come, how far we're going to go. Looking back, moving forward. Years later, with gray creeping into my hair and laughter lines etched into Amanda's face, I often found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of the past was a distant memory, replaced by a deep gratitude for everything that had led me to Amanda, to Lily, to the life we'd built together. I didn't think much about my ex anymore, except on rare occasions when I wondered if she had found her own peace. But those thoughts were fleeting, like leaves carried away on the wind. What mattered was here and now. The love I shared with Amanda, the family we'd built, and the life we continued to create. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't just about moving on, it was about thriving. And together we had done exactly that.